Hi guys, so this is take 2 of Tuesday video. Sorry I didn't have this up earlier, I just had some technical audio issues, but I think they're worked out now. So today we're going to be going through measures 51 to 59 into D-Hay. Go ahead and check the description box for the timestamp for your section and we'll get started. Okay, first violins. So there's two things that we need to mainly point out in this section that starts at 51. The first would be if you are on the outside, you're going to be playing the top notes. Most of this section is divisi. Inside, play the bottom notes. Also, the second thing would be you're alternating back and forth between arco and pizzicato a couple of times here. In 52 and 54, you only have an eighth rest to get into it and a quarter rest to get out of it, and at the tempo that we're going, that's not a lot of time. So instead of setting our bows down or even keeping our bow in our hand and pulling it into the palm of our hand, what I would recommend doing is maintaining your bow hold, tilting the hair towards your face, and then extending your index finger and plucking that way, keeping the bow hold intact as much as possible. I'm going to point out a couple of notes that you might want to mark. In 51, if you're on the outside, make sure you're playing an F natural, and that happens again in 55. It's not an accidental, it's just something you might have forgotten. And then in 57, that D sharp for both parts is going to be a low 1. And after the rest, on beat 3 of 57, that second D that you play, that quarter note, is also going to be a D sharp. So keep that low 1 for the third beat. In 58, the D sharp goes to a D natural, and you're going to play that with a fourth finger. And then the G sharp on beat 3, you're going to play with a low 1 on the G string. Now you're coming from an A natural, so A natural to G sharp would be 1, 1. If you don't feel comfortable doing a 1, 1 really quickly, you could start in half position and play the A with a 2, and then lift up and play with a 1. I'll probably just go 1, 1. And you should be fine as long as you don't hear a slide or anything like that. In 51, if you're on the inside, and also in 53 outside for those half note Ds, go ahead and use a fourth finger. And then also the last note of 58, that E, I'd prefer that to be a fourth finger, but if you're going to have trouble playing it in tune or getting the F natural low 1 in tune at the beginning of 59, you can go ahead and play an open, but I'd rather avoid open E if possible, even though it's just a 16th note. That's pretty much all the notes I wanted to point out. I just want to talk about a couple of rhythmic things. First of all, outside players in measure 55, you've got a tie from the and of 3 through beat 4. So it's half note, 3 and 4 and. So it sounds like this. 3, 4. And if you're confused about that rhythm, you can play it without the tie and the slur, and that should clear things up, and then add the tie and then add the slur. The other rhythmic thing would be measure 58. So you're playing 1 and 3, 4 E and A. So the rests are on beat 2 and then on the and of 3. Bow distribution is going to be really important here because you want to have enough bow to do that 4-note slur and add a crescendo through it. And also we're dropping down to mezzo piano, whereas we had been fortissimo before. And if you get your bow to the tip, that's really going to help with that. So think about lower half, and on that G sharp down bow, shoot to the tip so that you can go up with a big bow. So it's going to be rest, all the way to the tip, and then use as much bow as possible to really emphasize that crescendo. Other dynamics to point out would be in 51, your mezzo forte to support the melody. You guys are playing with the basses and cellos. The violas and second violins have the melody here, so you'll have to make sure that you're playing under them. So in 51, your mezzo forte. 53 is kind of an echo, and you go down to piano. And then 55, forte and crescendoing to fortissimo. 58, like I said, when you go to the tip of the bow for that crescendo, you're going to drop down to mezzo forte so that you have room to crescendo. You guys are going into the melody at 59 where it says bring out. So that's actually pretty much the melody that the violas and the second violins are doing at 51. And when you pick it up at 59, you're going to crescendo into it and then, bring it out, play a little louder. Okay, I think that's pretty much all that I needed to point out before we get started. I'm going to play this once through for the outside people playing the top notes, and then once through playing the bottom notes for the inside people. So quarter note equals 100. Here we go. 2 and go. here are the bottom notes for the inside people. 2 and go. One thing I noticed while I was practicing is that after the rest on beat 4 in measure 52, you're probably going to want to set your bow down for the start of measure 53 closer to the middle of the bow. If you put it in the lower half like you might instinctively do after a pizzicato section, it's going to be too heavy to play that piano measure. So after you do 52, you've got beat 1 arco, pluck, pluck, try to set it more in the middle, gently, so that you can play the piano gracefully. Okay, that's it. I will see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, second violins. So you guys actually have the melody through here. You guys and the violas have the melody. So there's actually quite a bit to mark. First of all, I want to point out that you're going back and forth between arco and pizzicato in measures 52 and 54. So since we only have eighth rests to get in and out of the pizzicato, instead of putting your bow down or even holding it in your hand by pulling it into your palm and anchoring your thumb, you're going to maintain your bow hold and you're just going to tilt the hair towards your face, extend the index finger, and then use that to pluck for those 2 notes. I want to point out a few notes that I want you to mark. First of all, in 51, you've got a low 2 for the F natural, but then it's almost directly followed by a high 2 for the B natural on the G string. So you might want to put a little arrow down over the F and up over the B so that you can make sure to make it all the way to both of those notes. The last note of 51 and the first note of 52, you can play open if you like. But the A in 52, I'd prefer definitely to be a 4th finger. The first note of 53, that D, you're definitely going to want to play with a 4. And then the G sharp right after that is a low 1. Make sure you know that the G sharp does last through that entire measure, so you get to play it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Again in 54, play that A with a 4, and 55, low 2 for the F, high 2 for the B natural, and then open D at the end. In 58, you got your divisi, so if you're on the outside, you're going to play the top notes, inside play the bottom notes. If you're on the inside, just note that those are G sharps all the way through the measure, so the 2 eighth notes and both quarter notes, you're going to play with a low 1 on the G string. Let's talk a little bit about the dynamics through here. So you're definitely forte at the beginning. Like I said, you guys have the melody, so play it out and play it nice and legato with lots of bow. Then you drop down for kind of an echo at pick up to 53 to mezzo piano. You still have the melody, so don't play super soft, but it does definitely softer. Then back up to forte, pick up to 55, that crescendos all the way to fortissimo at 57, and then through the rest of this section. At 51, the composer tells you that he wants you to play romantically, so some things you might consider as far as that goes would be lots of vibrato, definitely exaggerating any dynamic changes, using lots of bow, flat hair when you're forte, that sort of thing, but certainly I would say lots of vibrato. Okay, that's about it for what I wanted to point out. I'm going to go ahead and set my metronome to quarter note equals 100 and play through this section. 2 and go. I think I might have accidentally slurred the first 2 notes of 54. If I did, I apologize. Don't be like me. It might be a little awkward to practice going back and forth between pizz and arco so quickly, especially with this tango rhythm. So I would say definitely slow it down if you need to and speed up gradually into the quarter note equals 100 tempo. Okay, it's a fun part. It's nice to have the melody, and I hope you enjoy practicing it. I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, violas. So you guys have the melody throughout this section with the second violins. There are quite a few things that I want to point out, so let's mark in some of those. In 51, make sure you're playing an F natural, and then to play a B natural, it'll be a high 2. So I just put an arrow down over the F and an arrow up over the B to remind myself. The last note of 51 and the first note of 52 are both D, and you can play those open if you want, but definitely the pizzicato A in measure 52, play with the fourth finger. Same for the first note of 53, do play that D with a fourth finger, and then the G sharp right after it, you're going to play with a low 1. Make sure you understand that that sharp lasts through the entire measure, so you get to play that low 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. In 54, again, play that pizzicato A quarter note with the fourth finger. 55, again, low 2 for the F, high 2 for the B natural. In 57, you've got a D sharp, so low 1. Again, that accidental lasts through the entire measure. I would definitely put a sharp on beat 3, that quarter note. Just for some reason, the fact that it's after a rest and it's a quarter note instead of an eighth note, I almost missed it the first time I played through it, so I would certainly mark that as a D sharp. In 58, the D goes back to natural, and play that with a fourth finger. And the end of 58 is a little tricky. You start out with an A, then you have A, G sharp, low 1, fourth finger for the A on the D string, high 3, G sharp, and then end on E. So 1, low 1, 4, high 3, 1. I know that I usually don't like a 1-to-1, but in this case I think it'll be fine. If you're really uncomfortable with it, you could start with a 2, start a second finger on that first finger tape for the A and go 2, 1, and then back to first position for the fourth finger A, but honestly I think a 1-to-1 would be fine in this case. So those are all the notes and fingerings I wanted to point out. Let's talk a little bit about rhythm. I just want to point out in measure 56, you've got a tie between the and of 1 and then beat 2 and then an eighth rest, so you're playing 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and. So I'm going to play that. Ready, and 1 and 2, 3. It's not difficult, it's just something that may look a little confusing when you look at it at first. And then in 52, you've got arco, pizz, and then arco picking up to the next measure. So you've got rest, rest, rest. And if I didn't mention it at the beginning, we're going to keep our bow in our hand for this pizzicato because there's not a lot of time to get into and out of the pizzicato. Instead of putting it down or even holding it in the palm of our hand and anchoring our thumb, go ahead and maintain your bow hold. Just tilt the hair towards your face and then use your index finger to pluck that way. It's just the most efficient way to get around switching back and forth between pizz and arco. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the dynamics through here. So like I said, you guys have the melody with the second violin, so you're starting out forte, and you could definitely put an F under 51 to remind yourself. Then at 53, you drop down to mezzo piano. It's kind of an echo. Even though it says mezzo piano, just keep in mind that you are still the melody, so you'll have to be heard. Pick up to 55 goes back to forte, and then crescendos all the way to fortissimo through the rest of that section. Last but not least, the composer has written that he wants you to play romantically here at 51. So some things to consider when you're trying to play romantically would be lots of bow and definitely legato, I think, through this melody part. I would exaggerate the dynamics as much as possible, and then of course as much vibrato as you can manage. That's pretty much it. I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 100 and play through this section. 2 and go. While I was playing is something that I think I messed up when I was demonstrating for the second violins. The first beat of 52 and 54 is not slurred, and it's really tempting to play it as a slur, but I understand why they took it out, because if you did it as a slur, you'd end up on a down bow, and then you'd have to lift in order to get your hand in position for the pizzicato. By doing it down up, you're already in place. Do practice it so that you get into the habit of not doing a slur there, because it's going to help you with the pizzicato. Other than that, really nice section today. I hope you enjoyed practicing it. I will see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, cellos, so the violas and the second violins have the melody through here, so you guys are playing with the basses and the first violins with this supporting line. There are definitely some things to mark in through here, so get a pencil. Starting in 51, I want you to use your second finger for this A up on the D string. So on my fake cello, if this is G right here, A would be a whole step away, and that's where I'm going to put my second finger. Then 51, you've got A, G sharp with a 1 right behind it, 52, back to A, 53, stay right there, G sharp with a 1, 54, A, and then that low A in 54, you can go straight across, no shift or extension needed, play with a fourth finger on the C string. So if you think about the geography of the fingerboard for this, if this is A right here with my second finger, straight across would be D, straight across would be G, and then a whole step above that would be A, your low A that you would normally play first finger on the G string. So like I said, you're up here, second finger on A, 54, you've got quarter note A, eighth note A, low A. 55, again, A with a 2, G sharp with a 1 right behind it. 56, you can go back into regular first position on the G string, C, B, A, E. And then going into 57, you have another slide. So you're sliding a fifth, the interval of a fifth. So you're going from E to B and landing on B, the first note of 57. So basically, if you want to visualize that distance, you've got E, slide through F, F sharp, G, A, B. Now obviously it's not going to be in the same place relative to the body of the instrument. You get the idea, and we're going to practice that here in a second. Then going on in 57, after the slide, you can go back to first position and play the B just normally, the E normal, normal. Then the very last note of 58, you're coming from an E and you're going to shift up to third finger E on the A string for the very last note. So the last beat of measure 58, E here, your first finger lands on high D, and then put your third finger down for high E, and we'll practice that as well. That's pretty much all you need to mark as far as notes. The rhythms here I don't think are going to give you any trouble. It's not anything you haven't seen before. So let's just take a look at slide that happens. What I would recommend doing, just so that you know where you're supposed to land, because it's not a gliss to just a random note. It's definitely a slide where you're supposed to land on a particular note, B in this case. I would recommend practicing it without the slide just to hear that interval. So in this case, your first note that you're starting on is E, and then you're sliding up to B. And since it's a slide, we're going to go ahead and do it on a down bow slur. So then what you want to do after you find it and hear what it sounds like is find it on your instrument on the C string. Now, of course, it's not going to look the same, but... and check it with your B in first position to make sure that you're landing on the right note. So in an actual tempo, it would sound like this. And just note that 56 starts on an up bow. And just make sure that you're actually landing on B. When you get to B, that should be beat 1 of 57. So it's really kind of a fast slide. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to practice was 58, that shift at the end. So remember, your first finger, you always think about where your first finger is going. Starts on E, lands on D, and then put your third finger down for E. So it's going to sound like this. Okay, you've probably noticed this already, but we're obviously going back and forth between arco and pizz a couple of times here in 52 and 54. Since we only have an eighth rest to get into it and a quarter rest to get out of it, I think that this is not a time where we'd want to put our bow down, and even I wouldn't waste time pulling it into my hand and anchoring my thumb. I would try to maintain my bow hold, so here's your bow hold, tilt the hair towards your face, extend your first finger and use it that way. Okay, I also just want to point out the dynamics through here. Like I said, you guys don't have the melody, so you're going to want to stay underneath the seconds and the violas. You start at mezzo forte and then go down to piano at 53. 55 up to forte, but still underneath the melody. And that crescendos all the way to fortissimo in 57, where you continue through the rest of the section. Last but not least, the composer has told you to play romantically here. So some things that you might consider thinking about if you're trying to play romantically would be lots of bow, playing really legato, exaggerating any dynamics that you do have, and of course using a lot of vibrato. That's going to be really important through here. Okay, that's all I wanted to point out, so I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 100 and play through this section. 2, and go. One thing you might want to notice is that you're actually going into the melody at 59, so even though it says to drop down to mezzo forte, really you should be becoming more present than you were previously, and that is reflected in the viola part, but I would say for you guys too, you could even add a crescendo on that last beat of measure 58 on that slur. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoy practicing this section, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Basses, just a couple of things to point out through this part here today. First of all, you'll notice that you're going back and forth between arco and pizzicato. We don't really have time to put the bow down or even in the quiver here, so I would keep it in your hand and as much as possible try to maintain your bow hold, tilt the hair towards your face, and just use that extended index finger to pluck the string. It's just going to be the most efficient way to get around this. One bowing thing I wanted to point out would be in measure 55, there's a slur, whereas there wasn't one in 51 and it was a very similar part. The reason for that slur is because in 56, you're going to need to start on an up bow to get that crescendo in, and then an accented fortissimo down bow at 57. So just make sure that you're paying attention and doing the bowing that's written on the page, because it will help in this case. That's all the technical stuff. We'll just talk briefly about the dynamics. You guys are playing with the cellos and the first violins here. The violas and the seconds have the melody, so you're going to want to stay under them at all times. 51, you're mezzo forte. The echo of that phrase is at 53, and it goes down to piano. 55 is forte, and then crescendoing to fortissimo at 57. The composer has also told us that he would like us to play romantically through here, so that's written at 51. Even though you don't have the melody, you can still play romantically, so some things to think about would be using flat hair and really getting that core tone out of the instrument, really over-exaggerating any dynamics or accents, which you do have a couple of them in this section. And then of course using as much vibrato as you can stand. For that reason, I would really recommend not playing open strings here. So at 51, maybe playing that D up in position with a second finger. Same thing for the A in 52 and similar spots. It's definitely not required, but I think that if you're trying to play romantically, adding vibrato on as many notes as possible is a good idea. And since you've got a lot of half notes through here, it will really help warm up the sound. Okay, that's all I wanted to point out, so I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 100 and play through this section. 2, and go. Okay, that's it. Make sure you're getting a lot of power on those accents to really emphasize that tango rhythm. But other than that, enjoy your practicing, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next part.